Hey everybody, thanks for joining today. My name is Matt Yocum, and today we're doing a live stream to showcase the new Core 5 from Pro Sound Effects. Just want to welcome everybody. This is the first time we're doing one of these live streams. We're going to have some really cool special guests on today, Chris Diebold, Randy Torres, and Mark Mangini. And we're also going to be focusing on the libraries and talking a little bit about what it takes to put together a library, how you prep for that, what the ideas behind them are, and how they're useful to us as sound artists. And lastly, I also just want to give a big shout out to Pro Sound Effects for hosting this today and also for curating these libraries that we use every day when we're creating new soundscapes for film and TV. So I just want to talk a little bit about Core 5. Core 5 is the new library bundle that Pro Sound Effects has put together, and they have 19 new libraries contained within this bundle, which is a huge amount of content added. There's over 17,000 new files, which total up to over 490 gigs. And we're talking about almost a half a terabyte worth of new material, which is huge and invaluable to somebody like myself and to these other sound artists that we're going to have on. Because when we're sound editing, we want to have a library at our disposal that has tons of variety, lots of character, lots of different choices that we can use to help build whatever unique sort of sonic soundscape that we need to build. And so, I just want to go really quickly through a couple of the new libraries that are within this collection. So within them, some of the notable ones are Watson Wu's second volume of Vehicles, which is hugely helpful. There's Kinetic, which is by Mark Mangini. There's the King Collection Volume 2. So coming from, award-winning sound designers, Mark Mangini and Richard King, it's pretty amazing to have, legends like them contributing to these libraries. We've got two new volumes of general collections. These are sort of general, widespread libraries that cover a variety of categories. And then we've got more new libraries from Mangini, such as Tortured Memories, Data, and also the Rain library from him as well. So we're going to talk a little bit about those later. Mark Mangini is going to be joining us later. We'll talk to him about those libraries. This is a good chance to talk about the fact that these libraries are all UCS compliant. And if you're not familiar with UCS, it stands for the Universal Category System. This was a system that was developed to try and standardize the metadata that's available across a wide variety of libraries. And what it does is it essentially brings everything into very easy to understand categories so that we can then search and find those sounds. And so the Core 5 libraries bridge over 600 different categories. And one of the amazing things about that is that when you purchase one of these sound bundles, one of the core levels, it's instantly available to you through SoundQ. You can download it straight from the cloud. But you're also able to download it locally and create a local database. And then the third option available to you is to purchase a physical hard drive, which they'll mail you as well. And these bundles have different levels. So the nice thing about the Core 5 bundles is that they will scale depending on how many sounds you need and what your budget constraints are. So there's different levels. But today, I'm mostly talking about the largest of those, which is the Core 5 Pro Plus bundle. And that contains the largest collection of these new sounds that we'll be talking about today. And so I just want to go ahead now and invite on, we've got two really special guests that are going to be joining me. Chris Diebold, whose work you will know from Spider-Man No Way Home and Godzilla vs. Kong, just to name just a couple of the amazing works that he's done. And then Randy Torres is going to be joining us as well. He's worked on Oppenheimer and Tenet for Nolan, small little budget films. So very excited to have you guys on and to be talking with you today. So thanks for joining.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Oh, so sorry. I cannot hear you. Sorry about that. Hold on. Let me make sure my speaker is my... There we go. Sorry. Let's try that one more time.
Can you hear me now?
I can.
All right, sweet.
Hi, hello.
How's it going, guys?
Good, good. How you doing?
Doing good. Thanks. Thanks for coming on. Can you guys just start off by telling us a little bit about what you guys may have been up to recently? What have you been working on?
Yeah, actually, Randy and I have both been on Beverly Hills Cop. They're making a
Oh,
fourth one.
nice.
It's yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's a Netflix movie. There's a lot of action. It's really fun. We were able to record a helicopter for that
Oh,
film,
cool.
which is really unique. Um, yeah,
That's part of what we're going to be talking about today. I'm glad you brought that up. That's really cool that you had the chance to go and record a helicopter. I'm sure there's a lot of planning involved that goes into something like that, and also a lot of fun. So, yeah, I mean, that kind of leads me into one of the first questions, which is, when you're approaching a new film, whether it's something like Beverly Hill Cop or any other, what's your sort of mindset when it comes to recording new material for that show? And then for something as big as like a helicopter that you're going to record, how do you prep for something like that?
yeah. I mean, it comes down to you really have to just sit down and strategize what elements you want to record in a movie, right? Like what things will really amplify the soundscape to record a unique element for. And for this movie, it was the helicopter, right? So that's a really complicated thing to record, um, because you have to deal with airports, you have to deal with licensing, liability, and then you have to find the helicopter and the pilot to do it. This one was unique because we actually had to, in the movie, the helicopter kind of does some really crazy maneuvers and like flies
Hmm.
through downtown Los Angeles. Um, it so we had to find a pilot that was willing to do some crazy stuff to get those weird sounds, like
Nice.
some really aggressive tail movements and stuff. So I actually have a friend who is a helicopter pilot, and I went to him for some advice because it's an A-star helicopter. It's really specific. It has three
Hmm.
blades instead of two. So the stereotypical helicopter like whap whap sound is not actually that's not actually how A stars sound because they have three
Oh,
blades
interesting.
instead of the two. So he told me that he had he had a connection of a guy that has an A star. So we connected with that guy, and then we had to deal with all the liabilities and all the waivers, which is a whole bunch of stuff that you have to deal with a lot when recording all these kind of libraries. I had to do a lot of that with the animal library too, the wildlife collection. Um,
Nice.
but yeah, after that, then it's just the fun stuff. So you just lay out microphones, you figure out exactly what kind of mounting you want to do. You figure out how you want to record it, what kind of things you want to pick up. If we're going to use like the 100K mic, for a helicopter, that's not super useful, but for recording animals, that was insanely helpful. Uh,
Yeah,
so
yeah. I own one of the sunken 100K mics myself, and they're pretty magical when it comes to recording those ultrasonic frequencies, especially for stuff like animals and different sources. So that's an awesome tool to have in the kit.
for sure.
Yeah, I mean I've recorded aircraft myself, and it's definitely a challenge. I mean, I'm curious with the helicopter. Did you go into any of the detail at all of like the schematics of the aircraft to know how to record it beforehand?
A little bit, but helicopters are a little tricky too. At least the situation that we are in, where they don't like mounting things outside of the helicopter. So
Hmm.
so actually, we just kind of did like a two perspective thing where I did all the interior stuff on board, and then Randy was on the ground with capturing all the flybys and stuff.
Nice.
Um,
That's awesome.
yeah, I wish there was more. Like with vehicles, you can really get into the nitty gritty of figuring out exactly what parts of the engine make different sounds. Like figuring out where the intake is and putting a
Right.
mic by that. But the helicopter thing was a little different than I expected because I did do some research on that, and I was going to mount mics all over the place. And we got there, and
Hmm.
they're like, "Oh no, that's not okay with helicopters." And
You can't have a loose.
You really can't. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a nice segue because Randy, you've done some extensive vehicle recording yourself, and in fact, contained within the Core 5 bundle, you've got the vintage Harleys collection. I'm curious, like, sort of, it's a similar amount of prep when you're going to record something like a motorcycle. I'm sure there's some like trial and error in that process, and it's not always an exact science, but I'm curious, just like, is it similar how you prep for that?
Yeah. Originally with that, we just did it for a friend of mine who was doing a podcast, and he just wanted good motorcycle recordings for his podcast, which is about motorcycles. So once we did it, we realized that that it would be fun to do it again for real and do some onboard mics, do a lot of different perspectives for buys, and I think it's just important to have so many different kinds of perspectives and maneuvers and things that are just varied that you could use for pretty much anything. It's just great to be able, like when you go into some recordings, some libraries, they have one good buy or one good steady, and it's hard to be able to multi-purpose that for a whole scene. So it's just great to have a variety of maneuvers, a variety of angles that you can actually use for a whole scene, because sometimes you have to repurpose things, sometimes you got to reverse things to make it sound different, second thing. So the whole time we were just thinking, what is the most amount of maneuvers, what is the most amount of angles, onboard mics that we can grab to be able to have a good variety of stuff. And yeah, so.
Yeah, I love that. And I totally agree. I mean, like the best workups are the ones that like don't tie your hands into just a select handful of like, nuggets. It's like you really want to have this wide variety like you talked about to be able to cut whatever you need. That's the various actions, whether it's a helicopter or an airplane or a car, motorcycle. It's like vehicles are just these extremely complex, you know, machinations that are doing all kinds of crazy things, especially in movies. It's fine when you've got just a scene of somebody just kind of like driving down the road having a conversation, but once you get into some of the more actiony stuff like you guys are accustomed to cutting, it's the wider the workup, the easier time we have. um so I'm curious, like, obviously, if we had the time and money and resources to like record all new stuff for every project that we work on. I mean, that's the goal. Like, I'm trying to record more and more for each project I do, and like, you guys have talked about instances where you record for each of your projects, but we're not able to always capture every single sound new bespoke for every project we do. So, that's why something like the Core 5 library bundles that we have happening today are so useful. I'm curious, when you guys make a library purchase. I'm sorry. Let me actually stop right there. Let me do a quick little plug, and I'll get back into this question. At 12:25, so in about the next 10 minutes, we're actually going to do a library giveaway. So if any of you guys who are watching this are active in the chat and are asking questions or having discussions, Pro Sound Effects is going to randomly choose one of the people that have been active in the chats in order to claim one of the new libraries. And that's going to be the new Tortured Memory libraries from Mark Mangini. And it's just a really fun collection of designed sounds. So if you guys are active in the chats, don't sit there and spam, like one letter or something. Just if you guys are having discussion in the chat, Pro Sound Effects is going to choose somebody, and that'll be happening in the next 10 minutes. So anyway, sorry, back into the question I was going to ask you guys. So like I was saying, we can't always record all of the new material we need. So a lot of times we rely on commercial libraries and collections like the ones available from Pro Sound Effects in order to do our job. So when you guys are getting ready to make a new library purchase, what is it that you're looking for in a library? Like, what are you hoping to get when you make a library purchase? Like, what sort of stuff is important to you when you're making a purchase decision like that?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on it really depends on the type of library that I'm looking for, right? So, I guess we keep talking about vehicles, but that's a good example. If I need to buy a specific vehicle library, the number one thing I'm looking for is a full workup. So different mic angles, and I want whatever vehicle it is to be doing a bunch of different things: driving slow, idling, starting, stopping, driving fast. It has to be a full workup, because that's one of the biggest headaches, is to find an awesome recording, like the perfect vehicle, and you start cutting it, and then you realize, oh man, wait, this doesn't match what's going on screen, and you have to manipulate it so much that it turns into a lot more work. So a good solid workup is really important. The other thing I look for with libraries is just it does have to be high quality. Typically 96K, 192, depending on what it is. Obviously our backgrounds don't need to be at 192, but yeah, that's. What about you, Randy?
And how about for you, Randy?
Like metadata is so important, just being able to find what you're looking for. That's kind of, unfortunately, it's like 80% of our lives is we're searching for the right sound effects for things. And also, unfortunately, some sound effects that at least I have, it's titled like, whoosh 1 or hit impact 3, 4, 5. It's like, it's very unhelpful. So, what's great about all that core audio 5 stuff is the metadata is there's a lot in there, and it's all very descriptive, and it saves a lot of time being able to search for things when the metadata matches with what you're looking for.
Yeah, you're totally right. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I just love like anything that's unique and anything that's different and new. Sometimes, for us, sometimes you hear some of the same sound effects for things, and which when stuff works, I understand why people use it, but it's just great to have new stuff and things that's unique and interesting. So those are the two biggest parts of what I look for in a library. So.
Yeah, I totally agree. I usually when I'm starting a new project, and it kind of goes to Chris's point of like, it really depends on like what it is that you're looking for. Like, every time I start a new project, I'll try to find like at least 1 or 2 new libraries that I haven't owned before that are specific to the new project that I'm starting, because then it's kind of like the equivalent of like painting. It's like getting a fresh palette of colors that you can then use, and a lot of times hearing new material, especially when it's high quality and easy to search through, it can help a lot with sparking and generating new ideas. Like, a fresh sound library can be inspiring in terms of approach. And like you said, like I was thinking about this the other day, we really do spend so much time just searching for the sounds. I would say searching for the sounds is probably one of the most time consuming things that we do in our job. Like, so much of our time is spent just actually looking for sounds. So there is nothing worse than spending some amount of money on a library and like every description is identical for every sound in the library. It's like, this is not great. But Pro Sound Effects has done a really good job of curating these libraries and has really like dug into the metadata and making stuff UCS compliant. It's so much easier to search for things either by category or descriptive keywords that you're looking for.
Right.
So, the breadth,
especially when it's like you're saying, like the compliant, like being compliant, and if there was a standard for every library sound effect that had a standard of metadata, which is what it's been going that way, which has been nice.
Right.
But totally.
It's pretty amazing that they were able to retroactively bring all of their collection up to speed as well, because, before USCS was around, like you said, like it was kind of the Wild West. Like, there's so many different, I may name my files and use a certain structure and, have like a way of organizing things and then you may do something completely differently. So the fact that they were able to like take all of these libraries for the collection from different recordists and different designers with different ways of naming everything and to like bring it all into one cohesive, standardized metadata set is super helpful to us. Sorry, what were you going to say, Chris?
Oh, I was just going to say it might be a boring thing talking about metadata and, how you label the sound. It's not, we're not getting into like, how to record everything, but honestly, that's one of the most important things, because you can have some of the coolest recordings in your library. And if you type in a keyword and it doesn't come up, it almost doesn't exist, you know?
Yeah,
So it's really
absolutely.
important.
We're 5 minutes away from doing this library giveaway. I'm just curious to end things out with you guys. Do either of you or both of you have just like a short story of like either a favorite memory that you've got recording or something crazy or funny or whatever that happened? Do you have a favorite instance of when you've recorded something?
I've got a funny one. So the wildlife collection, I did some of the recording with a colleague of mine, Toby, who we do a lot of libraries together. Um, but so we were recording the leopard, I believe, and this was we were in contact with a trainer. They have these leopards, and they're not in cages, right? So they have them like in the hills outside of Los Angeles, and it was really cool because we could get really close to these animals, and they were making these really gnarly sounds. So Toby, he had to go to the bathroom, right? So we're in the middle of nowhere, so he just walks down the dirt road, and then goes somewhere. And the trainer, like he was paying attention to something else when this happened, right? And then he like looked around, and he was like, "Where's the other guy?" And I was like, "Oh, he just went to the bathroom really quick." And he's like, "No, he can't come back." And I was like, "Well, what do you mean he can't come back?" And he's like, "That's what triggers leopards." He's like, "He can't come back. Anything new that comes up will trigger the leopard, and he'll attack him." And I was like, "Oh, okay." So we were like screaming at Toby to be like, "Hey, dude, don't come back." It was pretty crazy, but the leopard did make some weird noises then because it was like kind of on edge, because someone left.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That
And
almost
so
wound up
Toby,
being
too.
an entirely different library there at the end.
Yeah. Right.
Uh,
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, we're glad Toby made it through that encounter. That's
He's
amazing.
alive.
It's really
Yeah.
cool that you were able to get up and close. I mean, animal recordings, like I know we've been talking a lot about vehicles today, but like animal recordings are one of those things when we're like designing creatures or even layering into things like explosions or impacts, putting in like textures from animal growls, like having these organic elements can really just add like this like bite to a sound, no pun intended. But and curious if you've got like a short story you've got.
Yeah. Actually the vintage Harley library we did, we wanted to get a really long onboard take, and so we put a mic kind of near the air intake, a mic near the exhaust, and then near a mic, I think it was near the back of the bike, and we had our friend go out and ride for at least a good, I don't know, probably 20 minutes, 15 to 20 minutes. So he went out, we were getting ready for something else. 20 minutes later, he came back and he stops and he's like, "Oh man, yeah, it was great. Did a lot of things, stopping at lights, doing a bunch of turns and stuff." And we start walking around the bike and we look around and all the cables that we ran are completely melted and steaming and sticking to the side of the bike. The recorder, the plastic of the whatever the cases that we use for the recorder is like stuck and melted to the side of the bike. The other recordist, Eric, he's like, "Oh my god!" And so it's still recording, and so we had to, rip everything off. Everything was like melted and in a big pile of plastic. And luckily, the only thing that we lost were the cables, which unfortunately some of those cables, though, the live cables are kind of expensive. But it's funny. I wonder if we should release that part of the recording because you can hear us like freaking out.
Yeah.
Like, "Oh my god, the cables are melting."
Some genuine panic.
Yeah. That's awesome.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Guys, thank you both so much for coming on today. I really appreciate you taking the time. For those listeners out there, Chris has a bunch of libraries that are contained within the Core 5 collection. There's Vault Door, Rattling Rides, Canines, his whole wildlife collection, which has an assortment of animals, as well as some contributions to the general libraries, which are super helpful as well. And then Randy's got his vintage Harleys collection, which we've just heard about, as well as the Colossal library, which is an amazing kind of trailer-esque effects library that you did with Joseph Fraioli. And that stuff all sounds amazing as well. So be sure to check out those libraries. They're within the Core 5 bundles. Thank you guys so much for coming on today, and I'll chat with you guys soon.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, guys. So I hope you guys enjoyed listening to them. They're both great guys, incredibly talented designers. Honestly, it's just an honor to have them on. So we're getting ready to do now the giveaway of the Tortured Memories library from Mark Mangini. So I'm just gonna wait here for just a second for Pro Sound Effects to let me know who that winner is. Let's see who's been active in these chats. I can see there's a bunch of comments going. Thanks, you guys. Thank you to everybody for joining again today. And it looks like the winner for today is Trinity Jackson. So Trinity, congratulations. We'll be reaching out to you about the Tortured Memories library. Thanks for coming on and participating in the chat while we have a chat up here in the live stream. Very soon here, in just a minute, we're going to have on our next guest. Most of you have probably heard of him if you're around in the sound community. He's quite a legend in the world of sound. He goes by the name of Mark Mangini, and he's got several new libraries within the Core 5 bundle, as well as copious amounts of previous releases that can be found within these bundles. He's got, he's obviously known for the Odyssey collection, which was released like a ton of them within the past Core releases, and he's done that with Richard Anderson. And then now he's got new libraries for us, which are Kinetic, Rain, Tortured Memories, and Data. So I'm really happy to have Mark Mangini joining us today. Let's see if he's available to come on with us. It seems we might potentially still be waiting for Mark for a little bit. Well, I can talk a little bit about his new libraries, the Tortured Memories and the Kinetic and the Rain libraries. I've gone through them. They're all super useful. I've actually got Sound Q that I can pull open here. And let's actually take a look at some of these new libraries. So if I go to, let's take a listen to Rain. So what's so excellent about this Rain library is that one of the interesting things about Rain is that there's so many different materials and mediums that work against Rain in order to create new textures and tones for us. So having a variety of different textures really can help us to create layers and specificity within a scene of what we're looking at, whether it's rain hitting a car, falling off a gutter, onto leaves, onto concrete. It's like there's all these different sonic textures that rain can bring. So let's just play a couple of examples through some of them. Here's heavy rain on a metal grill. Here's courtyard rain. This is a quad recording. There's a lot of beautiful movement in the gusts with this one. A little bit more of a splatty quality, which is nice. This is more of a distant, diffuse light rain. What I love about these recordings is there's not only a lot of variety, but again, like it kind of goes back to the conversation I was having. He's, there's so much diversity within these sounds, but also just the immense quality of them. Like every one of these sounds that I go through, like none of them sound like throwaways. There's tons of texture, like I was talking about, lots of variety. Oh, here's Mark.
Hey, Matt.
How you doing?
Life is grand. How are you?
Also doing grand. Pretty swell on my end. Thanks for joining us today. Salutations from the entire Pro Sound Effects community and everybody watching.
Pleasure to be here. Hope I can be of service.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was just going through here demonstrating a lot of the beautiful textures and variety from the Rain library that you've released within Core 5. And, I was just kind of hopefully not speaking for you, but speaking to the what's beautiful about Rain and having a collection like this is that there's so much like specificity with different layers and mediums against which the rain falls. And so if you're looking at a scene, you can really create some specified layers and create an immersive soundscape. And so the quality and variety that you've got within this library is pretty amazing.
Thanks. I'm glad you hear that. It was kind of a dream come true. I recorded most of the rains while I was doing Blade Runner 2049, which takes place a lot there's a lot of wet environments, and Southern California would have a once in a generation or two that February, these amazing storms. And I committed myself to going out every night and weekend to capture as many surfaces and intensities as I possibly could.
Right.
And I like that you use this term specificity, because part of my motivation was to get recordings of rains that didn't sound like what I had in my library heretofore, which were, rain is kind of noise-based. It doesn't have tonality or pitch, and it tends to kind of mush and turn into white noise. And the secret to good rain is the right surface, with the right microphone, with the right perspective, so that you feel wetness. I think if you're gonna do rain, it should feel wet as much as you feel the nature of the surface, be it concrete, asphalt, window, roof, on and on and on and on.
Yeah.
And also to the same point, you spoke of layers, but all of these are raw recordings. I mean, raw
Right.
in that I didn't layer these and design them. These are right off the recorder, sometimes with a little bit of high pass to get rid of city rumble, because I'm in a big city and you want pristine rain. So, I cut out 40 cycles or something like that, and I'd trim off my voice slates. But otherwise, they're just as I recorded them.
Right. So it's more source material as opposed to like designed rain, like immersive sound effects. But yeah, I was more referring to this idea that, you had of like sort of this, this idea of being able to take your raw sources and to then, bring different files within the Pro Tools. So if we've got, if we're looking at a frame of a scene and we've got cars over to the left that are close and are being rained on, and then there's a tree on the right, and then maybe we've got whatever that we know we have behind us, behind the viewer. It's like we can bring these individual layers, whether in mono or stereo, and sort of pan them and aim them and create a sonic soundscape with these varied textures. And like you said, what's so nice about these recordings is, as opposed to having very diffuse kind of white noise, there's like a granular clarity quality to them of hearing the individual drops and the tonalities that come out of that. So it's an excellent library, and I'm really excited to be using it in my own productions as well.
Thanks. The specificity was something I was after. And, as you mentioned it, you could have a scene with a car on the right and a tree on the left and a driveway in the middle, and you'd want rain on those different textures. And I do this all the time, though many of those recordings are immersive. They're 7.0 or 5.0 or 4 or quads. I'll pick a mono leg, and I'll just take a mono leg of an immersive sound. I'll stick it over in the left because it's rain on tree, and you can pan it and move it around in the mix very nicely.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. So I want to talk about some of your other libraries that you've given us within this new Core 5 bundle. We just did a giveaway. Trinity Jackson just won a copy of your Tortured Memories library.
Oh, congratulations.
And then there's, you've also brought us Kinetic and Data, or do you pronounce it Data? What's your stance on data?
Let me hold on. Give me a sentence. I'll have to say it in English. The data. I say data.
Okay.
That doesn't
All
make
right.
it right. That doesn't make it correct.
That's okay. It's like the classic discussion of lav versus lav.
Yeah, oh, good. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just curious, like when you're going to create a library like Kinetic or Tortured Memories or Data, what's the genesis of the idea for you? How does it occur? Do you wake up one day and you go like, I just really feel like playing around with a synthesizer to create data sounds today, or using EMF mics, or does it arise out of a need from a particular project where you need a bespoke set of textures and tones for that?
Well, it's a little bit of both. With Tortured Memories, that was a fun one because it started out with being inspired by the kinds of sounds I was getting from musical instruments that I was using to make acoustic source material for science fiction things in Blade Runner and in Dune. And musical instruments are always a go-to to me for source textures because they're rich and often melodic or harmonic and pitched. And often those make the most recognizable sounds, hence something that feels more like a signature sound. And as I was between projects, I was looking back on some of those experiments and I thought, well, rather than just beating up on my sousaphone or my didgeridoo for one thing, why don't I just pursue this to some kind of logical conclusion? So I decided I would record a fresh pass of many instruments in my home. And I have a lot. My son is a very gifted film composer, and he and I collect instruments. And so I thought, well, let's just start recording these in ways that you wouldn't record for a session, for a music cue. Let's think of sound and sound design first, mic them in ways that best shows that off, and then find some other nice tools to modify them and see what we come up with. And that's how Tortured Memories came about. Is I started hearing all these emotive sounds when I started slowing down and adding reverb or adding delay. And I'm very simple when it comes to processing. I don't often have very complex plug-in cocktails. It starts with a really unique sound that even if you heard the raws, you might not know what they were. And then just with a little light touch of some reverb to put them in a 7.0 space, now you have something that feels like it's telling you something, it's communicating to you some longing for something you can't quite get your hands on. So that was where Tortured Memories came from. It all happened in the course of about 4 weeks. I recorded about 30 instruments and then just started picking through them, finding the performances I loved, and then seeing what I could do to tear them up.
Yeah, I love this idea of using instruments in non-traditional ways and creating maybe like unpredictable sounds out of them, and then grabbing because like you said, they are rich in tonality and harmonics, and those overtones are designed into them in order to create musical notes that we recognize within a score. But playing them in untraditional ways to create other varied textures is a really fun approach.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, that's all right. I was just going to say the part of the utility of that as well is that as we know is like, when we work on movies that tend to have these either big action sequences or there's big score happening, it can, when you're adding just more noise content based sound into the mix, it can tend to just either not appear at all through the mix, or it can just add more mud and take up some of the headroom and real estate that you've got available to you. So when you're using these really tonal elements, they tend to poke through the mix in a way where they become sonically visible to the listener.
That's a great expression, sonically visible. I have to use that in the future.
Inspired by the many ways in which you describe sound.
I just had a little laugh because I'm thinking, as a guitarist, and I still record and make songs and that kind of stuff. When you're in the studio, when you're playing guitar, I always use round wound strings, and guitarists are always trying to get rid of the scritch. You know, when you move up and down the fretboard, you get that zeek, zeek, zeek. And I targeted that. That was one of the many textures for Tortured Memories, was sliding my calloused fingers up and down the strings to get these kind of metallic zuzzes, as it were.
Right.
And so I got my revenge.
Yeah, I love that. So I'm curious to ask you about your data library. I'm curious, you know, we've thus far we've been talking about recording organic sources. You know, when I say organic, I just mean sort of quote unquote real life sounds. You've been, you know, putting a microphone to a source and recording that object and then manipulating it in post. I'm curious, for a library like Data, do you have any like real source recordings that you then manipulated into electronic sounds, or what were you starting from a place of synthesis, or a combination of both?
No, I'll say it out loud. I'm the world's worst synthesist, and I dedicated myself to avoiding them to this very day. I mean, I have synthesizers, but I loathe having to go to them because I'm not facile. I find that the 2 hours it takes me to twiddle enough knobs to figure out what I want to get out of it is better spent recording an acoustic sound that's very close to it, and then processing it somehow with a group of plugins that I know a little bit better. That being said, none of the data sounds or data sounds are synthetically generated. They are all actual real-time recordings from hard drives and electronic devices that I'm miking in a variety of ways to extract those sounds, because our ear can't pick them up in the traditional way of listening.
Right. Are you talking about using EMF mics?
EMF mics and contact mics and suction cup mics and even regular old over-the-air microphones. You get something close enough, and you might even get an interference pattern that you would normally shun if you were recording a door close or a dog bark. But now that interference sounds pretty tasty when you want it.
Yeah, I love this idea of using organic source material in order to create electronic representations of something like data or like, you know, UI that we might see in a movie. Because one of the, I mean, I personally find synthesizers to be very useful, but one of the...
I didn't mean to throw shade on synths. I'm simply reflecting on my own lack of skills.
Oh, not at all. No, I mean, it's, you know, it's part of one of the other things I enjoy about our craft is that each of us may approach the same problem in a variety of different ways and use so many different tools to get to, you know, achieving the same end result, in the sense that it's, you know, telling the story that we need it to for the film or the narrative. But I was simply going to say that, you know, synthesizers, like, one of the downfalls of them is that they do tend to create exact replicating sounds by the nature of how they're put together. And of course there are parameters you can modulate randomly, but in general, for creating something like data, like you hit a note on a synthesizer or a keyboard and it generates the same sound over and over and over again in cycles. Whereas when you're starting with an organic source, there is no one perfect repetition over and over and over again. There's always some level of variation in there, and so you end up with more interesting, varied textures when they're coming from a place of original source recordings.
That's such a great observation, and there's deep biological and psychological and physiological reasons why that is true, and why I lean in more to organic acoustic sounds, because of all of those embedded cues in acoustic sound that, you know, time arrival and all the other attributes of acoustic sound that tell your brain this is real. Synthetic sounds lack most of those cues, and therefore it's just harder to imbue them with those attributes to make it feel, yeah, I believe that thing. It doesn't sound like something from a 50s Flash Gordon movie.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I love that. I'm just curious. So, like one of the questions I was just talking to Chris Diebold and Randy Torres before you came on, and like one of the questions I was asking them is, um, like a brief discussion we had was, as much as we would love to, as much as I would love to at least, we don't always have the time and resources to record every sound fresh and bespoke for every project that we're going to do.
Let me apologize in advance. Now continue on with your statement.
Yeah, so we don't always get to record fresh bespoke material for every new project that we're on, or at least not to cover the entirety of the project. We may have to pick and choose the specific things that we want to record. So that being said, all of us are sort of at some point beholden to using commercially available libraries. But, one of the amazing things about the Pro Sound Effects collections and the Core 5 collection, which you've contributed a pretty vast amount of sounds to, is that, we get to have the hours that other designers and recordists have spent recording material and then have it readily available to us. So I'm curious what you think the utility in having like a general library like that is. And also when you're going to make a library purchase, what is it that you're looking for or hope to find once you do so?
Oh boy, two great questions. Let me break that down. The first question was, what is the utility of a library?
Yeah, the utility. So like one of the benefits of the Core 5 series is that there's a bunch of really specific targeted libraries within, such as like your Rain library is an example of a very specific niche within the sounds that we need. And then there's the sort of like scope of the general library. What utility do you find in a general library like that?
Well, huge. As you know, I advocate for bespoke recording only insofar as, or my intention is really to just proselytize the idea of the importance of fresh ingredients, which is not to say that not only can I not record everything bespoke on any given project, I don't know anybody that can. I'll never work on the film where there's enough budget for me to record every sound anew. Right. For the movie, and so
it would take forever too.
What a horrible job that would be,
right?
Working forever, recording all new sounds for a project. I won't hold my breath, and so we all rely on sound libraries, and there's a great deal of joy in doing that when you have good material to fall back on. So I use sound libraries, and I continue to buy modern sound libraries because they're so good. There's so many people now clued and cued into the value of fresh original recordings at higher sample rates and in immersive arrays. There's just so much good stuff out there. No one ever has to really feel ashamed about going to a library anymore. And quite honestly, there's a kind of cost-benefit analysis that even I have to contemplate when starting on a project, which is, I know I've only got X weeks or months to work on a project. Are my talents and is my time better spent trying to record an aircraft carrier because I don't have a good aircraft carrier? Or is my time better spent designing something that needs more of my unique skills? And I make those decisions every day. So there's a great case to be made for how best is your time spent?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree with that. And then the second part of that question was, when you go to make a new library purchase, what do you hope, like what's the best case scenario when you download that library and unpack it? Because we're not always necessarily sure of what we're going to find when we open up a brand new library that we've just purchased. I'm curious what delights you in opening a new library.
It's utility. I've targeted something that I couldn't have recorded or I couldn't afford to record. God bless those who are out recording tanks and vehicles and aircraft that are very expensive to get a hold of. And they haven't been on my plate in a while. I've done them on specific films, and they were made available to the production. But it's just great to have something that's wonderfully recorded. Now, I'm looking for a narrative film aesthetic. There's a number of ways to record sound, and I think the value of my contributions to the Pro Sound Effects library and the contributions that others make to commercially available libraries are an approach that allows you to take a sound right from the download and put it in your timeline without a lot of fussing around, and it just drops in. I mean, you're always going to have to cut a car in and stop and make sure the turn off is in the right place. Nothing will ever drop right in. But there's a way of miking that, and there's a way of mastering it that just makes those sounds super useful versus, say, the capture for scientific purposes would be a very, very different approach to sound recording. So I'm looking for libraries that have a kind of media-related or storytelling-related aesthetic in the creation of those libraries. I'll tell you, maybe more importantly to me personally is what I hope I don't get. The libraries that I don't like, and these are libraries that are super useful, I know, for other disciplines like gaming, for example. I don't like needless iterations. If there's a laser shot, I want 6 great examples of it in one file so I can pick the one I like and drop it in my timeline, and it's easy to put it into Pro Tools, and boom, I'm on to the next sound. What I don't like is 50 one-shots. And it muddies up my browser. It exhausts me when I have to search for them. So I'm also looking for metadata-related utility on top of the actual audio recording and its fidelity.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was just talking to Chris and Randy about this similar subject along the lines of metadata, and we hadn't talked about concatenated versus individual sound files.
Yeah.
But yeah, this idea of metadata, like one of the things that I'm like impressed and also happy about with Pro Sound Effects is that they managed to retroactively bring their entire library collection up to speed to be compliant with the UCS system.
That's a big job. Oh my God,
a
1 million
huge
files.
Job.
I'm in the middle of doing it with my newer libraries, and it just takes forever. But it's worth
it. Does. It's an undertaking for sure. But like Randy mentioned, and I think it's true, is that we spend such an enormous time, at least as sound editors, maybe less so on the sound design side, but when we're sound editing for a film, like we spend a very large chunk of our time just searching for sounds. And like one of the problems with, and I understand it's helpful for the gaming people and their workflow to have individual one shots, but when you have 50 individual files of a gunshot, like how varied is that metadata going to be for you to be able to tell which of those 50 gunshots you need versus just clicking through one concatenated file.
Right.
But the UCS category system, I think, has made searching for our sounds and what we're looking for much more efficient, which ultimately, more time means we get to be more creative. The less time I spend looking for something, the more time we can spend addressing whatever it is that we need to be addressing within the context of the film.
There's such an art form to good metadata.
Yeah, absolutely. So I just want to, lastly, we've touched on all your other libraries. We've got just a couple minutes left. I was wondering if you could just briefly talk to us about your thought process behind Kinetic.
As I remember, I have this ongoing conversation with my good friend Ezra Dweck, who's a well-known mixer and sound editor and field recordist, and we have been lamenting for 40 years how hard it is to find just the right whooshes. Whooshes and swooshes are like a Marianas Trench that I can never crawl out of when I go in, because I have 67,000 of them, and the 100%. Metadata all needs cleaning up, and finding a good whoosh it's just tough. So I
Is
just
Whoosh 17 is your favorite? Like Whoosh 242? Like,
I wish it were even that simple, because the description fields and the category fields and the subcategory fields are still not all cleaned up in my library, and
right.
I just my eyes glaze over when I type in fast whoosh LFE or something like that, and
Airy thick whoosh.
Yeah, right. But
4,000 results.
Yeah, and there's probably a great airy thick whoosh that didn't get described that way. So you still have to listen to these 2,000 things. So this was just my way of trying to make my job a little easier, maybe for others as well.
Yeah, there's definitely something. There's something to that when there's these sort of common search terms, and one useful thing I've tried to do recently is to try to build playlists where if I know it's always going to be annoying to find that type of thunderclap that I need, like I don't, if there's rolling thunder, there's thunderclap. Sometimes It's described as lightning in the library. It's like, so I'll spend 20 or 30 minutes just getting the type that I know in my mind that I mean when I say thunderclap, and making a playlist. And same thing for whooshes and doors and
doors,
so on and so forth. We don't need to we could have an hour-long discussion about doors. But anyways, Mark, I just wanted to say thank you for your contributions to the whole sound community through these releases with the Core 5 collection from Pro Sound Effects. Everything that they've managed to curate of yours has been extremely useful. I mean, I can't remember a production I've worked on for the past several years now where something from Odyssey or one of your other specified libraries hasn't made it in. And the metadata that they've done is partially responsible for that, because when I type in what it is I'm looking for, it's that stuff rises to the top because it's so descriptive. So
yeah, great. I'm glad.
Thanks for coming on and for speaking with us and giving us a little insight into your process and how you think about this stuff. So it was a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you, Matt. It's a distinct pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right. See you soon. Bye. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Congratulations again to Trinity for winning the Tortured Memories library from Mark. I want to say thank you again to Chris Diebold, Randy Torres, and Mark Mangini, all incredible sound designers, all really amazing people in their own right. So thank you for coming on and speaking with us today. I just want to give a final reminder and just kind of a recap to everybody who maybe joined after the live stream got started. Go and check out on Pro Sound Effects' website. You can check out the new release, which is the Core 5. This is their brand new bundle that they've curated. There are 19 new libraries with 17,000 new sounds, which totals over 490 gigs. I mean, this is a ton of new material because, like Mark was talking about, not every sound is like a one-shot file. So if there's 17,000 new files, that means there are well over 17,000 new sounds within those files. And so be sure to check those out. It's just a really amazing curated collection, really precise metadata, really talented recordists. I mean, you get libraries from Oscar-winning sound designers such as Mark Mangini and Richard King. So absolutely be sure to give it a check. And, as always, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the Pro Sound Effects YouTube channel. It's really helpful to us as we continue making this sort of content for you guys. And thanks for coming out and watching, and we'll see you soon.